everyone, and welcome to our special Farm Files episode of FP Next, powered by John Deere. I'm one of your co-hosts for this farmer and rancher-driven podcast, Sarah McNaughton, and I'm here with Curt Arns.
Hi, Sarah. Yes, we're powered by John Deere, so for all of your equipment and technology needs, see your local Deere dealer. So if you listened to our last podcast with Betty Haynes, who was our guest, you'll recall us talking about the process and the way Prairie Farmer finds their best farm dogs and reveals the winners in a special issue of Prairie Farmer. So as editors and as readers, to have a whole issue of a farm progress publication dedicated to farm dogs, I guess that means that we love our dogs, right, Sarah?
Yeah, here at Farm Progress, we definitely love our dogs, especially when they play an important role on the farm with us. And today we're super excited to talk about some of the dogs who share our Farm Progress offices with us. We're going to talk about the importance of veterinary and healthcare for our canine friends. And also, we're going to play a little quiz game about what breed of dog is most popular to work with on the farm. And so now many of you don't hear this on purpose because of how much editing I do is to remove my two blue heelers trying to get their voice on the podcast as well. They're pretty vocal when people dare to walk outside of our house, or if the mailman happens to stop by when I'm recording, they're pretty loud. So I know I share my home office with an Australian cattle dog, Catahoula cattle dog mix Ripley, who just turned 8 this year, and my Australian cattle dog Roscoe, who just turned 1 last week. And Curt, what four-legged friends work with you?
Well, work. I don't know how much work they actually do, but one of our dogs is an American Shepherd named Daisy, and she's actually our daughter Taylor. It's her dog, but she's in college, and so she stays with us during that time. She is docile, super smart, very vocal, but she can shake hands, catch popcorn in her mouth, and she terrorizes our house cat. So that's the work she does. And then the other dog is literally a mixture of a lot of different things. We call him a mutt, but his name is Waffle, and he's very young. He's just a year old, small and shaggy, very playful, very fun, and he keeps Daisy on her toes. So each morning before everybody else gets up in the house, my wife and I sit and have a cup of coffee, and these two dogs play fight for like a half an hour. That's our entertainment in the morning when we drink our coffee. So yeah, the work part of the dog, no, not so much, but they are part of the family, that's for sure.
I mean, mine are nothing to talk working about. The one is scared of anything bigger than a cat, including cats, and the other one doesn't really know what he's doing, but just really wants to be involved. And he might rather herd some people around and nip some heels instead of cattle. But I know we've all written about our dogs before. And in our last episode, we were just talking about the Prairie Farmer Farm Dog of the Year contest. And I'll get more into the stories of why mine are just kind of like yours, the glorified house dogs. Who are way too spoiled rotten. But how do your dogs help out on the farm? Do they have any roles, or is it just the coffee entertainment?
Well, my wife would say that, they're not really much help around the farm except that they help us stay semi-sane. And, which is kind of true. I think that's why they're around. So they contribute in that way. But when I was young, um, we had work dogs, what we would call a work farm dog. Uh, the one I remember when I was really young was an old German Shepherd. Her name was Princess. And when my brother and I would roll around in the grass when we were kids, she would sit on us. She'd just sit right on top of you and not hurt you, but that was just her thing. And she wouldn't hurt a flea. She put up with us tugging on her ears, pulling her hair, and hugging her. And but she was just a great dog. And then as I got older, we always had healers, kind of like you, and we had blue healers and red healers. And one of my favorites, I have to tell this story. One of our favorites was a red healer named Honey, and my dad loved that dog, probably more than most people he knew. He trained her to shake hands. If he knelt down, she'd jump up and put her paws on his shoulders and hug him, and she was good with cattle and hogs. And we had breeding gilts at that time out in open pens. And she would, go in a corner and get these gilts into the barn when no person could do it. She was just really good about that, better than any human. And she also had this really good ability to herd cattle, chase calves, when they would get out under electric fence. She'd chase them back in. The only thing with her that was that she could get a little overly aggressive. She'd nip at him a little hard. So you had to kind of stay on top of her and call her back when you needed to. But she was just an awesome dog. When she died, in her old age, my dad cried. And my dad was not a crier, but that was his favorite dog. And so good old Honey, she was a great, great farm dog and a good work dog too. How about you?
I would like to say that I cry at the thought of my two perfectly healthy dogs dying, so I relate to that.
Hmm.
But
Yep.
I always had dogs growing up. I had a few huskies, we had a few Pomeranians. We kind of were pretty much all over the place with the breeds that we liked. I never had cattle dogs until Ripley, who was my first. They're cattle dogs, but they're blue healers, right? They're just healers.
Right.
And so when I was a sophomore in college, one of my friends at NDSU had a little blue Merle puppy that she brought with to the equine center. We had our horses there, and I loved this puppy. And she told me about how there was one left in the litter. So then the next week, I decided I was going to drive out from Fargo out to Mandan to pick him up. And then he went everywhere with me. We always joke that he was kind of all of our college dogs because there was more than one club meeting he went to at NDSU. I think he has visited just about every bar patio in Fargo as well. Anywhere he could come with me, I brought him. And then when we added Roscoe, it was actually through a friend of a friend who had a medical emergency come up and needed to rehome this blue heeler puppy. And I saw a picture of him and he looked just like Ripley. And I had to go get him. So I drove 5 hours out to Minnesota and picked him up. And now there's just two of them causing chaos in my house. But we're going to get into our little guessing game, Curt. So, what breed of dog do you think is most popular on the farm? Or maybe which one do you see the most on your farm visits? What breed?
When I'm out and around, and I don't know how this lines up nationally or whatever, but I just see more healers than anything else around the farms these days. But I also see, a fair amount of Australian shepherds too, and a few border collies. But that I bet you I'm going to guess healers is one of the most popular, at least around here anyway. When I was a kid, I always wanted a dog like Lassie, the collie that was on TV. Maybe you're probably way too young to remember that, but that was always the TV
I
show when
remember
I was,
Lassie.
yeah, when I got home from school, that was on TV,
Yeah.
Lassie. And I thought she was just the coolest dog. But then we have enough burdock around our farm that my dad always said a collie wouldn't do very well around here because it would be covered in burdock all the time. So maybe
Right?
Lassie wasn't the perfect dog either.
Yeah. No, the collies are gorgeous. They've got such gorgeous coats, but I could not imagine grooming those. I like
Oh,
my slick coated heelers to just
right.
brush them and go. So there's no official list I could find of the exact popularity of farm dogs, but IFA Co-op shared the top 10 most common dog breeds between herding and protection and including livestock guardian breeds. And so the number 10 and number 9 spot belong to the Marima sheepdog and the Great Pyrenees. Number 8 is the Anatolian Shepherd, which are historically bred to serve as protector and guardians who are intelligent and loyal. I know the NDSU sheep unit has a couple Anatolian Shepherds and they love their sheep and they love to work. The corgi comes in at number 7 as the pint-sized herding dog. Lassie, the collie, comes in at number 6. Catahoula's at number 5, and the border collie lists at number 4. So, Curt, you might have already guessed it, but hearing that list, what do you think is next for the top 3 spots?
I still think the Australian Shepherd's going to come in there somewhere, and you've got to have those healers in there, right? I don't think you've mentioned them yet, so that's my guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's find out. And also, again, to clarify, these are just herding and protection
Right.
breeds. And so I know I see a lot of labs on farms, kind of like the family
Hmm.
dogs, but spoiler alert, not a lab. And number 3 is actually the Australian Kelpie, who are known for their tenacity when working cattle and for having persistent attitudes and being incredibly loyal to their family. Number 2 is maybe all of our personal favorites of the Australian cattle dog or healers who are loyal, compact, and built to work unless they're like my cattle dogs. And then that leaves the Australian Shepherd or the Aussie at the number 1 spot. And they're known for their intelligence and, of course, energy. So, Curt, do you think we missed any breeds?
I've seen a few Huskies. I've seen some Saint Bernards on farms too. Along
Oh, yeah.
and a lot of labs, and a couple golden retrievers.
Mhm.
So that's not on the list either.
And kind of changing gears here a little bit, Curt, a lot of our content on Farm Progress revolves around animal health and even human health. And in February of this year, I wrote a story titled 5 Steps to Healthy Farm Dogs. And Merck Animal Health shared a lot of great information in that article about how our farm dogs can stay healthy in between vet visits. It's always hard to get those farm dogs to the vet. We will never downplay the importance of annual exams and vet visits for any kind of animal, but we also know what it's like to try to get farm dogs to the vet. Mine love to go for car rides. I know there's not a lot of them like to sometimes. So we'll run through that list of making sure your farm hand is in tip-top shape. So Curt, start us off.
By the way, our dogs hate to go to the vet. They love the vet once they're there. They just don't like the ride because I don't know. There's an anxiety thing. It's just like going to the doctor, or maybe worse, going to the dentist. So, yeah, the first thing, first thing on the list is to spot the signs. A change in your dog's behavior can signify a potential illness.
Absolutely. So you want to look out for lack of appetite, decreased activity, vomiting or diarrhea, coughing or sneezing, discharge from eyes or mouth, hair loss, or itching. And if your dog isn't feeling itself for a day or two, it might be time for a trip to the vet. And of course, vaccines are something that are essential to keeping your dog in top shape. Core vaccines, of course, depend on your region, but they defend against diseases such as rabies, distemper, parvovirus, and rabies. Vaccines to prevent Lyme disease and Bordetella, which is kennel cough. My dogs do get boarded at the kennel when we travel sometimes, so my two get the whole array of vaccines every year. And of course, a good relationship with your veterinarian is super important to your dogs and all of your animals' well-being. I know my dog has Addison's disease, an autoimmune disease. Out of nowhere he got that, but we have a super close relationship with our vet. But Kurt, I think we could sit here and talk about our farm dogs and regular dogs and all of our pets for a few hours, so we should probably cut it off here for this episode of Farm Files.
Well, that's it for this episode of FP Next, powered by John Deere. To our listeners, we want to thank you for tuning into this episode, allowing us into your tractor cab, your truck, on your farm, in your shop, and in your fields. A special thank you, as always, goes out to our digital production and marketing team members who put in a lot of work with us. And we'll add links to the stories in this episode description. Look for those story links in our descriptions. And if you want to be sure not to miss any top stories, sign up for our Farm Progress text blasts, which bring the hot stories right to your inbox.
You can sign up for those text alerts by texting FARM, F-A-R-M, to 20505. Be sure to follow Farm Progress on social media to stay up to date with ag news and more, and check out the digital edition of your regional publication at farmprogress.com. And make sure to tune into our next episode of FP Next, where we finally are joining the carbon conversation with a farmer who's been there and done that, as we talk about what carbon can do for you. Follow along with FP Next by listening and subscribing on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube or Farm Progress online. And be sure to leave us a review if you enjoy the show.
Sarah, you always say 5 stars or nothing.
Definitely. And remember, if it's agriculture, your friends at Farm Progress have you covered. Here's wishing you high yields and good weather. We'll see you next time.